Hi, James.
Hey, how are you?
How are you? Can
I'm
you
very
hear me
well.
well? Yeah?
I can hear you very well. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you very well.
Okay,
It's a
good.
pleasure.
Perfect.
First
Oh, it's
of
a
all,
pleasure.
it's
No,
a
it's an
pleasure. And
honor.
on behalf of ABC, it's an honor to have you on our live.
Wow.
So I'm gonna just start reading some text that ABC asked me to read. I'm gonna read it in Portuguese,
Yeah,
and then we're gonna start. I'm gonna introduce you to our viewers, and then we'll start from there. Ok,
fantastic.
ok,
Okay.
ok. Então, pessoal, eu vou ler um texto aqui, que é um texto que é meio de praxe, que sempre tem que ser lido no começo de cada live. E a Live ABC foi idealizada como um espaço informal para a troca de conhecimentos sobre cinematografia, e assim como em todos os nossos eventos e publicações, reiteramos que não são tolerados comentários e posturas machistas, racistas, homofóbicas ou de qualquer natureza preconceituosa. All right. So,
Well, thank you. Just quickly, it's an honor to be here too. So thank you for having me. It's
oh
wonderful
no.
to
Oh,
speak
great.
with you at a very strange time in all of our lives. So thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the initiative of these lives is to since we are all DOPs and we are stuck at home in these weird, strange times, the ABC got the idea to spread some knowledge since we are at home, and it's an
Mm.
honor to be able to reach people like you, like yourself, and hear a little bit from you. And
Wow.
also, you're our first North American guest here, so it's
Wow. Amazing. Well, that's even bigger honor. So thank you for that as well.
and so I'm going to introduce you briefly in Portuguese and just
Yeah.
explain to everyone how this is going to work.
Yeah.
Então, o James é um diretor de fotografia norte-americano. Ele é membro da ASC, a American Society of Cinematography, e ele é o fotógrafo do Moonlight, que é um filme ganhador do Oscar de melhor filme em 2017. O diretor é o Barry Jenkins. Ele ganhou melhor filme, melhor roteiro adaptado, melhor ator coadjuvante. O James também foi nomeado como Best Cinematography, melhor cinematografia. E o James também fez outro filme com Barry Jenkins que se chama If Beale Street Could Talk, se Beale Street falasse. Ele trabalhou com Kevin Smith numa comédia terror que chama Tusk, e fez também um filme sobre Guantánamo, que se chama Camp X-Ray, com a atriz Kristen Stewart. Ele também é um grande diretor. Ele trabalha também muito em publicidade, com nomes como Spike Jonze, Manu Kossu. Ele é um cara que transita bem nos dois mundos. E vamos começar agora a entrevista. Lembrando que vai ser em inglês, mas depois no YouTube terá legenda. E essas entrevistas serão gravadas. So, first of all, James.
It sounds much nicer in your language than in my language. I like it. Sorry, go ahead.
No, just the first question is a little bit, it's just to know about your trajectory, because it's interesting for us Brazilians to see how it works in North America, since you have a much bigger industry than ours. So what was your trajectory? Did you went to film school, or did you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I did go to film school. I went to film school in Florida, a school called Florida State University, which is in a city called Tallahassee. And I did that for 2.5 years. It's actually where I met a lot of the filmmakers that I continue to work with today. You know, Barry Jenkins, who you mentioned previously, who I did Moonlight and If Beale Street Could Talk, and a film called Medicine for Melancholy a long time ago as well, and some other projects too. You know, he and I met in school pretty early on in that part of our lives, and connected in a great way, and you know, became very good friends first, and then started to collaborate after that, and sort of continue today, of course, as well. But I also sort of, you know, knew about the industry prior to that. You know, my mother is actually in the industry. She's a costume designer, and she like many parents of children, and many professional filmmakers who have children and bring their kids to set occasionally. And my, vacations for school breaks and things like that were oftentimes spent, going to visit mom somewhere, and spending some time with her, which also therefore meant spending time on set. So as a child, I sort of learned about what filmmaking was, not through story or through cinematography or through anything in regards to, like, I think what, we think of as filmmaking. The truth is, my first excitement about filmmaking came as a child, about what the set experience, the on-set experience was like, the chaos of it and the energy of it, and all these hundreds of people doing different things, and watching these big guys with big lights, and watching the makeup department and all these different people doing all these different things. And I think for me, as a sort of a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 8-year-old, I think that felt very exciting, and I didn't know why. And so I think my first love of the process, my first love of filmmaking came from watching the process happen, the creative process and the creative energy. And I think as a child, that's sort of really indelible. It really makes its mark. So I think for me, that was the first thing. But then, yes, film school after that. Yeah. And then after that, what happens, I graduated film school in 2003. And what was happening in America during that time was this sort of access to digital technologies, small cameras. People were making films for, for example, the first film I made with Barry Jenkins, Medicine for Melancholy, this was made for like, $20,000, something crazy. Yes. And so, that was made by, I had a camera that I bought because I was doing some small projects as well for some money. And we just decided to make a movie in 18 days. And there was a lot of that happening in America during sort of the mid 2005, 6, 7, 8. There was like a group of young American filmmakers that were sort of, doing things like that. Filmmakers like the Sapti brothers. Exactly. They had a film called Daddy Longlegs I remember watching years ago. And watching them come up is amazing too. But there was a bunch of us that were sort of doing films like in that sort of budget range, and with that sort of spirit of, let's just make it happen as young filmmakers with, very little money. What can we do? A Cassavetes spirit kind of. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We were very much like, I think we looked at films of his and other filmmakers as well as, well, I don't understand. Why can't we do it then? I mean, clearly they, yeah. Yeah. And it's fun because you started in very big sets. You saw how it was with money, and then you say, no, we don't need all that. We can do it with much less. I think. Yeah, it was funny. Exactly. I witnessed what it was like on a big scale, but then, it wasn't like I went to do like an internship with some famous cinematographer or anything like that. I think I don't know. It wasn't interesting to me for some reason. I think for me, I needed to sort of figure out how to do it from the ground up, from a very big, small position. Because I didn't feel confident in myself yet, to be honest with you. I wanted to sort of gain that internal confidence as a cinematographer specifically, to feel comfortable on set. I had a lot of insecurities as a young 20-year-old something, and I didn't know how I could do that without beginning somewhere very small and sort of very slowly working my way up. And, Moonlight was a big break for a lot of us that were involved with that film. But, there were many, many years before that of us, I imagine, failing and struggling and all these different things that go along with that moment. So, there was, a good decade or so of all that time too. That's cool because you can start, when you start on small project, you have more space to risk and to have some error also. So it's totally. And also I see that your work is very story oriented. You really focus on the story. Sometimes if you follow more like to be an intern and with the DOP on a big sets, sometimes you get more oriented to be more of a light guy, a guy who likes to. And I see a lot of difference between your movies because we go from Moonlight, which has a lot of, and if Bill Sweet could talk, and then if we go to Tusk,
It's completely different. It's all different genres, and also totally different approaches of light. And it's really to serve the story. I see.
Wow.
In a way, that's really
thank
what.
You.
That's why. Well, I was amazed. And another one last thing. And what did spark your interest in cinematography? When you were on these big sets, why did? Yeah. What was that?
You know, I think for me, there's a lot of different answers to it, of course. And as a child, I witnessed all that stuff and watched it and things like that, and felt like, you know, the camera department has all these cool toys. You're a 12-year-old boy, like, you know, they seem to have all these interesting things. But then that interest changed over time, and then that interest became about, you know, well, I didn't feel confident in, you know, other aspects of filmmaking very much. You know, I didn't know that I wanted to be a writer. I didn't feel like I had that voice inside of me. But for whatever reason, whenever I was given a camera, it just felt like it, you know, it was a tool that felt inherently, you know, I just was in touch with it. It felt like a tool that I understood pretty quickly, as opposed to something that seemed I didn't understand how to write. I didn't understand how to do anything else, to be honest with you.
It's true.
And how to edit. I mean, I had basic understandings of these things, of course, but you know, that tool of a camera seemed to always sort of excite me and engage with me. And I think also too, it fit my personality. I think that's part of it as well. It fit who I was. I was someone who really enjoyed as a person to connect with other parts of the world. You know, as a cinematographer, what's really amazing about the job is you get invited into other people's spaces, and you get to collaborate with people that you're unfamiliar with as a person, as a culture. And I think that's something that I was I don't know, it just felt right and as a good fit for who I was as a person as well.
Ah, great. Yeah, I feel that also, that if you're more kind of, for myself, a little bit of a shy person, the camera part is somewhere you can kind of stay on your little corner. You don't have to communicate so much with everybody. And in film school also, I tried directing, but I had problem to deal with actors, to communicate, to make them. And then the camera part, the light part, it only depends on you. You have... So there is a little bit of that also. The thing.
Yeah, there's a safety feeling about, like, I guess,
a safety feeling. Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, no, I remember for some reason I remember as a young filmmaker doing things with a camera that are just outrageously not safe to do, very unsafe things. But somehow, because I had a camera between me and the whatever it might be, you know, hanging out of a car window or a helicopter, or just ridiculous things that I would never do in my real life. But for some reason, you feel like a detached thing. And I think there's something about that is more even subconscious as well, as a human being aspect of feeling safe in a space, but yet at the same time engaged with it. You know, you're an active participant as well. So it's not like, you know, I never felt like, even when I was in a scenario where I didn't know, I don't know, whatever it might be, but I didn't know the space as well, it wasn't familiar to me, I never felt like I was detached from it. I felt like I was engaged with it. And so I think that strange hybrid of possibilities of feeling safe and secure, at the same time engaged with the space, is something that I think is really amazing for me. Yeah.
And there is this thing of, you are the first viewer to witness the scene when you operate camera. So this is like a big privilege also, right?
Oh yeah, no, completely. No, I feel like to be up on my feet with actors like that is like my favorite part of the process for me.
Yes, because you see it happening in you're the first eye of everyone's eye.
Oh, there you are.
Oh, yeah. Someone called me and it cut the...
Oh, don't worry.
So talking about the camera, I'm going to start to talk about the language, the camera language, the grammar, the cinematography grammar, if you understand what I mean, in Moonlight, because there is, for me in Moonlight, one of the things that blew my mind the most is the camera work, how you mix all this spinning, Steadicam shots. It's like a mix of Michael Bay with the Darden brothers, you know, kind of, and you're not afraid. You're really not afraid to go from one to the other, because the movie starts with a very 360 spinning around the dealers selling. It gives all the tents, and it almost gives you a false clue of what the kind of movie it is. And then you cut to this little boy, to this shaking camera running with him, and then that goes along for the whole movie like that. So how did you approach that? It was something totally thought before, or it's something that the location, the place gave you? Another question, are you from Florida? Did you know the environment, those places, or it was totally new for you? How did you...
Yeah, sorry for laughing before, only because what you were talking about was like almost exactly the kind of conversations that I would have with Barry. And then, you know, that first edit, for example, between the first opening shot and then the next one is really interesting. And it's sort of like that you're tapping into basically what a lot of the film aesthetically was sort of like attempting to do. It's interesting, you know, I think, I believe that, you know, it's interesting, especially now that we're talking across different countries, but there is a very familiar language that I think, you know, we all share as filmmakers. You know, we're all able to sort of express ourselves. I can watch a film from Hong Kong. I can watch a film from, you know, from South Africa. And of course, there's
Yeah, sorry, we lost you. You were saying about you can watch a film from a lot of different places.
So to me, like, there's a very similar, familiar way that we all share. And that, yes, of course, there's different dialects and different, you know, from different countries. You can, you know, have different sort of, I call them languages, but, you know, sort of basic understanding of what cinema is sort of expressive and how it's expressive. So, you know, for me, I grew up in like the 80s, 90s, watching a lot of music videos, watching a lot of like big blockbuster American films. But then I also watched a lot of, like, in my late teens and early 20s, a lot of like French New Wave films, you know, just sort of smaller productions that had a different language to them. And I was a fan of both things. And I think when Moonlight came around, it was a piece of material, I mean, like as a script, as a story, that seemed to sort of speak to these inherent conflicts. Of course, I can go into what the movie is about, but we all know what the movie is about. I mean, more of what we were talking about in terms of aesthetics was sort of playing with some of these inherent sort of understandings of what filmmaking language is all about. And I think what you can do when you sort of tap into those a little bit as a cinematographer is you can sort of be playful with them and, like, you know, apply a certain technique to one scene, and then I think also use another technique in a different scene. And if you're able to sort of, I wouldn't say master them, but have some sort of nuanced and some sort of like personal through line, you can like massage those things to fit different places.
But they fit perfectly. I mean, the first time I watched it, I didn't even notice it. I had to watch on the second time. Then when you start to see all these layers and all this, it's a big mix of languages, of genres, and it goes along with the feelings of the characters also, I think. Because I see in the first act, when Chiron is a kid, it feels like the lenses have more texture to it, and they have more shallow depth of field, and they are more flary. And as it goes to his teenage years and then to his adulthood, the camera starts to chill down a bit, like his life, because he had a very tough childhood. So it translates on the camera in a way that, and then we feel completely that language along, and it suits the film to perfection almost.
Yeah. One thing that's very important, I think, and it's something that I think a lot of filmmakers, some of my favorite filmmakers, do all very, very well, is they set up in the first, say, 5 to 10 minutes, like endless possibilities for visual expressiveness. You know, you think of like a Wes Anderson film and how stylized those films are. But he sets you up to accept them as an audience very quickly. You know, if you can establish that, I think in the first few minutes of the film, you kind of establish the rules of the next hour and a half or 2 hours. If you can sort of, you know, and this is a general statement, of course, that there's filmmakers that do different things, of course, but generally speaking, I think anyway, if you can establish yourself some flexibility early on in the film aesthetically, the audience will allow different things to come in later on that you know, if you don't establish something, just say to them, like, here's how we're going to speak to you for the next 2 hours. It might be jarring or it might not make sense in some respect, but if you can sort of tell them early on, we're going to do all these different things with the camera. We're going to use color in these ways. We're going to use whip pans and zooms and all these different things. Well, then it's somehow like, I think, you know, it introduces the audience in a way to different possibilities that can come later that, you know, and I think I'm a big fan of that. I love, like, I know some filmmakers, for example, and some cinematographers that love kind of creating rules for themselves. And this film, we'll do these 5 things, and we'll structure them in a way, and, you know, we'll talk about in pre-production. Well, in Act 2, we'll only use, you know, this focal length, and we'll only use this lighting technique, and in Act 1, we'll use this one. You know, I respect that completely. If it works for you, it works for you. But for me, I very, very much love, like, having the flexibility. And you're like
a jazz player. You like to improvise. That, I mean, is that something that comes from shooting on location, you think? Because when we shoot on a real location, it's 360 possibilities. You can really sometimes, I mean, you can prep as much as you want, but sometimes when you're there with the actors, with the wardrobe, with the makeup, with everything on, everything changes when you're about to shoot, and then you have all these what I call happy accidents that sometimes are key to the film. They change completely. And you and Barry, do you have a relation that you try to cultivate? Because I know some directors who they know that these happy accidents can happen, but they are not predictable. So they set up the scene to make the possibility that they can happen in a way. Sometimes they don't happen, but sometimes they do happen. And you know, when an actor does something that is not predicted, and then it gives another meaning to the whole scene.
I mean, this perhaps comes from our early days in many, many ways. Because when we first began making films, when we made our first film, you know, there was no crew. It was 5 people in a room, and then in a weird way, there's endless possibilities because you don't have anything there's nothing in the way. You know, you can put the camera over there. You can be like, good. And so I think you know, what we found during that process and other films early on was how much some of our favorite moments were found in that time, in that space. And so, you know, very much so. I think we're filmmakers that love sort of trying to find or be a detective to seek out those kind of moments, and how to structure. It's really tricky. It's interesting because the last, you know, I just finished right before this whole virus thing happened, a TV series with Barry. Basically finished it. We almost finished it anyway. We got a few days before they shut us down, but it was a much bigger production than he and I had ever done before in terms of, you know, budget, in terms of crew size, and tools that come along with that. And, you know, we really, really enjoyed it. And it was a wonderful experience, and I think very, very positive. But it came with a certain amount of challenges as well, because, you know, what we were trying to do was, you know, tell a story in a new language with a different technique, and with a story that needed us to tell it differently than previous films, but at the same time trying desperately to hold on to some of these early, you know, benchmarks or foundations of our filmmaking voices, which came from that kind of flexibility you're talking about. So, you know, this was a constant struggle for us during the course of the film, was, you know, how best to go about combining these two worlds. You know, and it's going to be a constant battle for us, I'm sure, as we make films. This will always be the thing that we battle between. You know, do we want the camera move to do this very elaborate technical thing, but at the same time being open to, you know, something spontaneous. it's inevitable battle. It's the filmmaking thing, you know. It'll always be that way. Sometimes I wish I was, you know, had a different discipline that allowed a consistent flexibility, but you know, here we are.
No, but I think that's the magic of it.
Uh-huh.
It's a constant battle with yourself also. When you're doing a feature, I mean, on commercial, not so much, because you have clients and all who have the final word.
Yeah.
But when you're on a personal project or an indie project, it all depends on you. So it's a big battle with yourself all the time.
Yeah.
You want to push yourself a lot.
Yeah.
And
true. Yeah, for sure. Because I'm somewhat responsible for putting in the challenges along the way.
Uh-huh.
You know, I'm choosing to have this big light here, or I'm choosing to have this different technical thing, because for me,
Mm-hmm. And what I like, I think, when I compare Moonlight to let's see, a film like Camp X-Ray that I didn't knew, that I watched for the interview, and I like it very much because you translated in a way the tediumness of Guantanamo. We feel by the framing, by the time of the scene, that the soldier is also in jail. The girl, so she in a different jail from a different politic side, but she's wasting her life there, kind of, in a way also. And the camera really, you don't try to make it as appealing as Moonlight for the lights. It's really kind of everything white. It's really kind of oppressive white, you know. There is can you talk a little bit about how you conceived that idea? I really like that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So I didn't know that director before that project, and I interviewed for the project, and he, you know, I think in many ways he took a chance on me. His name is Peter Statler, and he's a great filmmaker. He's a great human being as well. And I don't know, he never told me this, but I think he took a decent amount of risk, because before that film I hadn't done a whole lot. And nothing that was very remarkable. And I'm sure he was speaking to other DPs that had a bigger resume or whatever it might have been. You know, and I remember one day he told me, you know, like, the reason why I hired you is because I really wanted to find someone who I felt could invent the language of this film with. Not someone who, you know, came to this with a massive vision and could put their beautiful stamp on something, but someone who was a real collaborator, which I give him full credit for, Peter, because, you know, that's a risk to take, but it's also like part of what I love about this job. It's not unfortunately, it's not always that common that you find a partner in that way, you know, right away. Sometimes it takes a very long time, like I have with Barry, for example. But with Peter, it came right away, which was wonderful. So, you know, he and I, you know, sat down for a number of weeks and days, and just sort of had a lot of discussion about what these characters were feeling. You know, what it must have felt like. We watched a lot of documentary footage from Guantanamo Bay. We watched went through a lot of photo books and sort of news articles and things like that sort of gave us a sense of what this place looked like. Sorry, that was me. You there?
I lost
what this looked like and things like that. Oh, sorry again. So, and then, so, you know, it came from nothing, from the very beginnings of this, when we built and built and built and built. And I think what we kind of wanted to do was what you alluded to earlier, which is really take to make a visual language that represented the main character, who plays by Kristen Stewart's perspective, which is this monotony, this, you know, she's working in a prison, of course, and present the coldness and the starkness and the sort of the emptiness of these spaces, the rigid, legitimate, like, rules and all these things that were very difficult, and watch these two characters connect through these walls. And that's sort of what the film was all about, to sort of within these structures, you know, still find some human connection between the doors, the walls. So it's a film that I'm quite proud of, actually. And it came, you know, at a time in my career that it was, you know, really, really early, and you know, I appreciate very much Peter's perspective and what he brought, how he brought me in, and his collaborative process was great.
No, what I really liked it, and I saw a little bit of your persona, is that you're not trying to sell your work and say, oh man, I have to do a really nice looking light here, make her look beautiful, do this, do that, because this is going to be my card. It's not that at all. You're 100% into creating the movie language, and that's really, that's also how I like to see, do my stuff also. But
Thanks.
and on Tusk also, I was really I watched Tusk and I was also blown away. It felt like a Japanese horror movie shot in Canada, inspired on comic books with kind of a theatrical light, and it's first of all, I was like, this is very strange. What is this movie? And then at the end, it really surprised me. I was like, this is a kind of very unique film. So I felt that you're a guy that are really into reading scripts. I mean, you're not that kind of person who thinks, oh, lots of night scenes, lots of, oh, I'm going to go crazy here. No, it's more about the story. The first thing that right?
Yeah. I mean, this is. I mean, as a cinematographer, we are storytellers. It's a critical thing for me to sort of engage with, and so story and the script is a huge part of how I choose a project. It's also the who the director is. He's just as important.
Kevin Smith, of course.
But Tusk was a very strange one. It again came in a time in my career that I think I would still consider sort of building and early on, and Kevin again took a risk hiring me too, I think. But he's a wonderful guy. He and I got on really, really well, and it was an amazing opportunity to collaborate with someone who I was a huge fan of, with Clerks and Chase and Amy. And these are films that for me early on, especially watching them as a teenager, or maybe not teenager, teenager, were really sort of valuable. So anyway. It's a very strange, very different movie. I think Kevin would even describe it as strange. And two, it definitely wanted something different from me. And I think, what you're alluding to before about, how the different kinds of projects that I had done in the past, for me, it was really important to try all these different things. I continued to sort of still trying to shape my voice and understand myself as well. And I think, it's interesting now, we have all these young filmmakers. It's a really popular thing now to be in your, I say popular, maybe this is always the case, but I feel like with the advent of digital technology and social media, people are graduating from film school in their 23, 24, 25, whatever. And they are having the kind of access to things that were never possible a decade or two ago. And so all of a sudden you're finding yourself in a position where you're a cinematographer or a director or a producer or whatever. And you're very, very young still. This is a time when, you're discovering who you are. I mean, I'm discovering who I am as a person to this day. And so you're still in this self-discovery mode of figuring out what these things are. And so, and for some people it comes early. Maybe, maybe you're 18 or 19 or 21, and you know exactly the kind of person you are. You know exactly the kind of creative, person you are, and what kind of work you want to create. I very much continue not to know the answer to that.
Yes.
And so doing films like Tusk or Camp X-Ray and Moonlight and Beale Street, these are all sort of self-explorations as well, to be perfectly honest. And I think it was really important, and continues to be very important for me to be open to different people, different points of view, different cultures, different countries. I mean, everything. It's like I feel very much still like I want to be a sponge and allow other things into my life besides just maybe what I'm good at. Okay, I can order this type of lens. I can get this camera system from the rental house pretty simply. I looked it up on the ASC magazine, and Wally Pfister used these lenses on whatever movie, and I think that's fantastic. And the idea that information is out there is really, really wonderful. I think, especially to young filmmakers, and so it has a lot of value. But I think equal to that value is also trying to figure out who you are as a person, who you are as a filmmaker, and specifically who you are as a cinematographer. These are huge, huge, huge questions to ask yourself. And I think really valuable ones to explore within, especially when you're young and you're just trying to figure out, you're building a career. These are like hugely important, I think, things to figure out. So films like Tusk, different kinds of movies that maybe some people who maybe know my work from maybe Moonlight would be surprised for me to why was he involved in that film?
Exactly.
I think we're massively shaping, actually, and hugely important for me as a filmmaker. Yeah.
No, I admire your courage to just throw yourself like this, and it's at the end it's a very your range goes from terror to very sensitive neorealistic movies to no, it's
thanks.
It's I really like it. And now let me. I had going back a little bit to Moonlight, since it's the movie that everybody knows the most. I'm going to focus on it a little more. So there is this scene that I like a lot. It's yes, where the mother on the second act, the mother and Chiron, they have this discussion. And they look straight to the camera, eye to eye. Like they break, in Portuguese we say they broke the fourth wall.
I would say the same thing.
Same thing. They break the fourth wall. Yeah. And that's something that I saw that Beale Street is completely different language, very classic in a way, with very somber camera moves, but you kept that signature thing. Yeah. It's like a Barry James thing, kind of. How did that happen? Did you plan that? Was that a happy accident, or was you just felt on the spot that it was good, that you should do it?
Yeah. So the first time we used this technique was actually on a short film a few years earlier. It's a short film called Remigration, and it was a sort of 20-minute sort of science fiction future movie that I'm sure very few people have actually seen. I think it actually is on YouTube, though. It's called Remigration. I think it is. It was a while ago, anyway. We had seen this technique used by other filmmakers. I mean, we are by far not the first filmmaker to use this technique, of course. But it seemed to feel very important for us when we saw it being used, and I think also too, like, still photography is a very important thing for Barry and I in terms of references. And very often in still photography, you see the same thing, people gazing into the camera.
Exactly.
And I think, it felt for us incredibly intimate, and something that Barry and I are constantly striving for is to put the audience really inside the conversation between the characters. So, having them stare literally into the lens for us is like, it's almost the most intimate thing one can do in cinema, I think, in some respects. So, you can't overuse it. I think it's a tool that I think is really, you have to be sensitive to it and know, when to use it and how close the camera comes and what lens, what focal length you're using. All these things are really like fine lines of what's wrong or right. So, we're sensitive to the idea of when we use it. And oftentimes, and I think it's in that scene that you're referencing, I think it just felt correct, to be honest with you. Yes. I don't remember it being in the shot list, if I can go back in my mind and remember, but I don't believe it actually was. It's something that I think really the truth is, I think Barry is like really like listening and looking for these moments. And I think that is an example of, I think, a moment where and I think he and I kind of have we understand it a little bit. And when we kind of like, check in with each other, and does it feel correct? Does it feel right in this moment? And if so, we'll just go for it. And I think the truth is, I think on Moonlight, I feel like every time we tried it is in the movie. I think in Beale Street, maybe, no, that was in the movie too. I think almost every time we do it, it ends up in the film somehow. So I think it's like, it's an emotional thing. And I think it also has a lot to do with the actors as well, by the way. I think the actors will sort of, if they're really giving us something, and you can tell like the emotion and the tension in the scene is just building and building and building and building between two characters. I think it's like, you just feel it, and it's like obvious at some point. Please, we should do it,
Yes.
Yeah.
No, there's also another scene that I'd like you to comment about is, of course, the key scene with Sharon. But I like how you built. I don't know if it's my interpretation. I think the beautifulness of cinema is that everybody has his own interpretation of stuff. And once you have something in mind with Barry, but once you release it to the world, it's like a baby. It grows up and everybody interprets its way. But he goes, it's like a Friday night. He takes the subway to go to the beach because he has no friend, no parties to go, nothing. He's a lonely kid. And but he goes in the subway, and then the lights in the subway are very documentary in a way. It feels like you just went with the camera and shot it, and it's kind of very real in a way. And then when you arrive at the beach is still, we feel that it has this urban lighting, but it's kind of a more magical urban lighting.
Yeah.
And it has to do, of course, with the scene, because they're going to kiss each other. And can you talk a little bit? And after the kiss, also when he gets home, you start with the very harsh white light of the mother's house that cuts you off the dream completely, like that. And how did you? And can you tell us a little bit about this moment?
And so I mean, I think we have to remember how small a film Moonlight was in terms of its budget. It's in America, I'm not, quite small. I'd say $1.2 million. So it's pretty small. And so what happens with the budget like that here is, what you do is you end up making choices location based. I can't bring in 1,000 lights down the road to make this look any way else. So what you do is you location scout to find places that sort of give you the sense of what you're looking for narratively. And this is very much true for what you're referencing now in this film, in the sequence you're referencing. Also, too, we knew in terms of the beach scene, that the magicalness and the sort of dreaminess that you're referencing before, very much so. This is a romantic scene. It sort of feels out of place, and it feels like a very, these two characters are having a moment that no one else is invited to. This is something but for these two characters and these two characters only. And so we knew some of our limitations would actually help us in some respects. It's a small film that I can't, I'm not going to be able to light the entire stretch of South Beach in Miami.
Of course.
This is not in our possibility. So what you do is you think about it a little more, intellectually or symbolically or metaphorically, and you think, well, maybe we can choose other choices that can actually be of service to us as a storyteller, instead of being frustrated about, oh, I wish I could have 10 more condors and 10 more lights down the road. Well, let's take a different attitude and different personal approach to something and say, well, maybe we make this more intimate. I mean, maybe this is a space that we can only see these two characters, and we can't even see the ocean. We just hear it on the audio. I'm not sure if you recognize, but you actually never see the ocean in that scene at all.
Exactly.
So it becomes much more dreamlike and things like that, which for us, I think, worked very, very well and became actually more powerful. So this is a technique that you learn as an independent filmmaker, from a very small budget perspectives. You learn, to make everything that's not possible for you, to make it a strength instead. And this is true for, it continues to be true for us today in terms of how we approach our projects. Whenever we're hit with a roadblock or a challenge that seems like, I had this dream for the last 10 years. I wanted to shoot this scene like this, but someone is telling you, no, it's not possible. I'm sorry. Well, make it actually an advantage in some other respect. So always be thinking about these things, and that's very much, I think, how that happens. So, but going back, all the other scenes in that sequence were exactly what you're talking about. It was a small film, so how do you do a scene on public transportation in the bus system and the train system? Well, you just take the camera and you go shoot on the train.
But it suits so well the story. I think if you've done it in another way, it would have looked much more not so powerful like it is. I guess now that you're dealing with bigger productions, with more money, with more people, more producers who have opinions, who can you miss a little bit of those days, of the Moonlight days. How's that for you? I know we've talked that before about the battle, but I guess sometimes I feel maybe it's so good that we only want to do film like this almost, right?
Yeah. It's become simple, and then when simplicity comes, like there's a little more relaxation and things like that when you're in charge of 50 people and all the different stuff going on. It can become, if the job changes to be something that you're not maybe excited about anymore, and maybe I think everybody is different, and some people really love the big scale stuff, and they manage the team very, very well, and they're able to sort of dictate how 1,000 people should move around.
Exactly.
So I think these are different parts of the job, and I think
yeah.
you have to be good at all of them if you want to have a career in some way. But maybe you're not good at some of them. That's okay too, and you can just find your other way within what is a strength of yours. So yeah, anyway, it's a balance, of course, but I do love both, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
I like having the ability to do both things is a real luxury. I feel very lucky, of course. But yeah, I understand what you mean. It becomes, the bigger the stuff becomes sometimes hard to sort of manage that. But I will say, coming from where we come from in terms of starting with very small projects and things like that, it gives you a certain confidence that even if this becomes such a huge job, and my God, there's so much stuff out here, and the money we're spending on this one shot is ridiculous. This is insane. If something doesn't work properly in that moment, I don't get scared anymore, and I don't get too nervous, because I come from a place where I know if you put the camera on my shoulder, we can figure this out. I'm sure we can make something happen.
And that's the ironic situation of now, is that we will have to go back to that kind of way. Yeah, we'll have to go back to early cinema or very low budget cinema with small crews and able to do, because it's going to be hard for the next years to get so much people together. So I don't know. It's my opinion, but in a way, we will have to kind of. It's good that we have you have this kind of experience before, because then it's weird. I don't know. There's a little parallel that we can do with the situation right now.
No, it's true, and it gives me some hope and some feelings of some kind of weird security. But I do have concerns about all this stuff as it moves forward. I don't know what happens to some of our key crew members that we love and cherish and need as support systems through this process, through our creative process.
Of course,
it's going to be very difficult for some people, and I worry. These are the things that go in my mind right now. Yeah,
it's true.
Yeah.
And now one more question, a little bit about on Beale Street and also in Moonlight. The cast was almost all Afro-American. And how was your approach to the lighting the skin? Because one, it's very Moonlight is more greenish, yellow, bluish. And then for Beale Street, you went much more warmer. I know it's also to give the era, to put back the film in time. But maybe you don't have nothing to say about this, but how is there an approach to the
it's interesting. Yeah. So it's funny. I get this question a lot because I look the way I do, and it's confusing for people. Maybe. I think it's interesting. So when I first started to try my best at being a cinematographer was in film school, and the first time we'd shoot film and all these different things. But those opportunities were very often with Barry, who made Moonlight and Theater. So, and he was making projects with people of color from the very beginning as a filmmaker, and so him being my closest collaborator,
of course,
it was sort of like hand in hand. I learned to light generally with people of color, which is part of the same moments I was learning to expose. Was the same moment it was with people of color in front of the camera. So I never had to learn a new technique, or I never felt as if I had to think much about it, to be perfectly honest, because it sort of came with the job in some respect. So I don't have a lot of, it's weird. I don't come from a place where I could say, oh, I learned this new technique and that's how I figured this out. I don't have anything to offer in that respect. But but I will say for me, it's been a wonderful, well, first of all, a privilege to have that opportunity in front of me. But I also say, like, I know historically, especially here in America, there's been a tradition of having to photograph, people with darker skin tone as a challenge in some regard. And I've never quite understood that perspective. I find lighting people with darker skin tones to be a real, to be something that feels very like expressive. You can have color do things in different ways. You put a pink light on or a blue light on my face, it looks ridiculous. It looks crazy. But somehow you can do this with people.
Oh, shit.
That are in Beale Street and actors that are in Moonlight and other films that I've done as well. It's something that I think is very creative, very expressive, actually. So for me, it's not a challenge that feels uncomfortable or feels like it's somehow difficult. In terms of techniques, I think it's not so different from how I approach most scenes, which is soft, reflective. Are you there? Sorry, my internet was.
Yes.
It's crazy. The soft, reflective qualities is something that I try to use, generally speaking. A lot of bounce light, a lot of LED sources now, because of LED becomes so easy and popular. LEDs are a big help for us. It allows us to fine tune a value, and also very quickly a color temperature that can take on a certain color on someone's face that maybe is different than the background or different than their wardrobe, and allows their face to come out in all these different ways. And I just think that those kinds of techniques are sort of what I love, generally speaking, no matter what actors' color their skin is. It seems to me a thing that I use on anyway. But clearly, I think it's very helpful when I think about it more, obviously, with people of color.
Of course. No, great. And sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, and talking about the picture, the references on Beale Street, I read on the trivia on IMDb that you and Barry were really influenced by Roy de Kerchove's photography in Harlem in the 60s, 70s. And it's really, we really feel it in the movie.
That's good.
But at the same, I just want to add a little thing. It was your second feature with Barry also. Moonlight was the first.
We have 3 feature films. One is shot in like 2008 or 9.
Okay.
I think it came out in 9, called Medicine for Melancholy. It was a very small film. So anyway.
That was your third film, but then the language that surprised me is that you went completely the opposite way from Moonlight. It was very sober and classical and very respectful also. Can you of the era, of the time? What was the approach on that? Can you tell us a little bit of this?
Well, I mean, you should go back and watch the first film, because it's also incredibly different than the other 2 as well. So it's interesting you said this. I think for us with Beale Street, it comes from a book of the same title written by James Baldwin, who's an amazing author, an amazing American author. And I don't know, it's interesting. So when I read his novels, generally speaking, in his writing, specifically to the book If Beale Street Could Talk, but also his novels just generally, I find his language, the way in which he writes, to be, I don't know, it's hard to describe because it's multifaceted, but I first of all, I love his writing, but it's this wonderful combination of like, delicacy, but with real immense power and strength. There's a beautiful specificity to it, and a very beautiful like expressionistic qualities to his writing. I mean, when you read his books, it's like, I don't know, I can't help but just see pictures. They're just so expressive.
And Roy's photography was a perfect match.
Very much so. I agree. Totally agree. 100%. And so it was about trying to adapt, not just for Barry to adapt the screenplay from the book, but also to try to, for me, I felt my job on some level was to adapt, of course, Barry's vision clearly as a director, of course, but also to try to sort of find how Baldwin's words and way of writing would come to me as a cinematographer and find its way through myself as well. So the sort of the way the camera moves work, even the format we chose to shoot on the Alexa 65 was a large format camera. The lenses we chose and all these different things had a lot to do, in my mind, hopefully anyway, with how Baldwin writes. And so, you know, it was sort of, that's sort of how where it came from. It came from its original material, and trying to find a way to, you know, to use, I guess, what rhythms and ways of writing, I think, you know, he wrote in. It's interesting. I very much think that, like, a cinematographer, I've oftentimes made analogies to cinematography and writing, actually, in, like, you know, our job is to, like, you know, adapt how you see something, you know, the colors, the lenses, the movement, etc. It's how you see something. So how you see something, to me, has a lot to do with how you write. Where is your, and then where do you put in a sentence, you know, emphasis, or where do you kind of, like, your dry humor about how you write, maybe, let's say, has a sort of omniscient perspective to something. I mean, this is all, like, how you're telling your story is very much like how you write, I think, anyway. So I think I like to think that I'm sensitive to sort of that kind of stuff. And I think one thing I'll say about Barry too, he writes so beautifully. And so even his screenplays are just written with so much, you know, beautiful language. It's not just sort of descriptions. I mean, they're like, I think anyway, they're, like, written almost like novels in the way he describes, and just his style of writing is expressive and beautiful as well. So, you know, anyway.
Oh, great. Do you feel that the language that you and Barry developed in Moonlight, you think you might use it again in the future? Or it's like, you know, that was for Moonlight and Nevermore, we're going to try a completely different thing? Or we're just going to take a little bit of that? But because when I saw Moonlight, I was pretty sure that this was what I was like Harry Astor movies. If you saw, they kind of keep the same. A lot of directors, like, I mean, do that. Spielberg, you name it. Even Cassavetes, he always shoots kind of in the same way with zooms. And I was so impressed with Bill Sweet, how different it was. The only thing that I found that there was a match was the eye, the POV, the point of view, kind of looking the breaking the fourth wall. But so for the next projects, don't now you don't have to tell us, but what's the strategy?
No, it's interesting. You know, I hope in many ways that our work always has something about us inside of it. I hope that there's something about the work in Forever, Never, Never that has something that you could say, like, oh, that comes from Barry in a certain way.
Yes.
But to your specific answer, I guess the answer, if I had to say yes or no.
Sorry, every 60 minutes.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, now we have to start again. But we're reaching the end, so sorry to keep you.
That's okay. No, it's okay. It's totally fine. I guess to answer your questions, no, I think each time we want to do something different, of course, and we're trying to pay attention to, you know, the material that we're doing, and I'm sure, you know, because really the truth is, every time we're making decisions about what something looks like, we're really trying to pay attention to perspective, to character, and all these different things. So as long as the characters change, we'll change too. I think it's just inherent to, like, how we think about storytelling generally. It has everything to do with, you know, what the characters are doing is sort of how I think we think about a scene comes from that perspective. And so, you know, probably the answer is no. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. You know, people seem to like Moonlight. I think, the Moonlight was done anamorphically. Beale Street was done spherically. The last thing we just did use both. You know, I think, like, there'll be times where we're gonna go back to an anamorphic look at some point. Too.
That's just for the anamorphic. What I really liked it's that Moonlight is such a kind of had this neo-realistic vibe, kind of, you know, and like the Darden is kind of a drama story in the harsh neighborhoods, but you guys went with anamorphics, which are more, they give more of a tale vibe. Like for me at least, I see when it's spherical, it's more raw. It's more, and you didn't want to go that way. Let's keep it like a tale, like a story. Maybe for the anamorphics for me, and then you have that very shallow depth of field, who also breaks from reality a lot. because our eyes doesn't see like that.
No,
and
it's very interesting. Yeah.
I really like that. And also I read somewhere that you shot on 2K with the, I don't know if you did that with the Amira. No.
No, this was with the
No.
this was with the LF, I think.
The Moonlight was LF?
No, sorry, no, sorry,
No.
XL, the XL.
XL, yeah, okay. But you shot on 2K.
We did.
True?
We did shoot only 2K. I mean, you know, the truth
that
is,
was
when we made
many
this movie,
reasons. Was many reasons, or more to have more noise on the image?
Yeah, no, I think the truth is, I think it was many reasons.
But it came out really well because maybe it brought a little more noise to the image.
Yeah.
And since I think you used, I feel that it looks like Lomo anamorphics, like old anamorphics.
They were they were Hawks actually, but yeah,
Hawks.
Yeah, Hawks,
right.
Yeah, you know, the resolution game is a crazy one, man. It's so insane. You know, I've seen that movie Moonlight, and even other films I did before Moonlight that I shot 2K, projected on huge screens in film festivals, and it's fine.
Exactly.
No, it looks good. Yeah.
It looks like an anamorphic 16 kind of, and it feels that you gave a little more sharpness to it when you were grading, and it gives that. Like on 16 millimeter, you used to put more sharp afterwards, and it gives a really specific kind of look that's very interesting, kind of crispy and kind of also kind of smoky in a way also at the same time.
Yeah. No, but you were referencing before about I guess the unrealistic worlds we apply with our lenses and then filming techniques. It's interesting. I think a lot about the early films that I would watch as a child and how much impression they made on me, you know, and you know, watching different worlds and just the whole idea of movies in general and how these things do. I think for me, they can change lives. It's not to be overly dramatic, but they have a real indelible mark on you as a child, especially. And a lot of those early films that I remember making me feel that way were films that sort of took on a mythological perspective in many ways.
Exactly, mythological perspective, yeah.
Yeah, and it's sort of like the Joseph Campbell of the worlds and things like that. Like, you know, and what power the myth has for us as audience members. And so it's interesting. I think because I associate, because of, you know, where I come from, what age I am, and what films I was watching as a child, I associate a lot of like Spielbergian, you know, George Lucas, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, kind of like sort of cinema language in many ways to sort of like, I think to sort of express that mythological language.
Exactly.
So, by no means do I think that you have to use those techniques. I think myth takes on many different aesthetics depending on where you come from in the world and all these different things. But for me, that's just what it was. And so I think when thinking about language and ways in which to tell stories, and this is just generally, not even just specifically to Moonlight, but you know, who I am and what kind of choices I make as a cinematographer generally, the idea of mythological languages, I think, is actually really interesting. And it's something that I sort of take on, and I think it wields a lot of power, actually. If you're able to tap into a sensibility that makes you feel like the moment is bigger than just the moment. You know, there's actually a, you know, and this is the manipulation of the filmmaker hand in general, obviously, right? The ability to do that is like kind of amazing.
Yeah, it's true. It's for me, myself, it reminds me of memories. It's and it fits the movie a lot because the movie is about memories of childhood. I mean, kind of we travel to the lifespan of this character, and as I told you, I don't know, I felt that in the first act there was more defects, you say, to the artifacts to the lenses, and then it chilled down as we got to nowadays. And I mean, that's my take. I really it refers to memories, to childhood memories. If I think of my memories in childhood, I kind of see it not in anamorphic, but something a little blurry, a little with a shallow depth of field. It also, for me, you see it's always Chiron that he's in focus, everything around him. So it also isolates him in a way from the rest of his community, because he's really isolated in the story. So it's always this shallow depth of field is not just beautiful, it also puts him in isolation in a way also. I feel that, I know.
It's also I think I agree with what you're saying, and I'll also add the idea that like it's also very chaotic. And as a child, I remember those days being very, like, as you're coming of age and you're a 15, 16-year-old boy or girl, or a young 8-year-old, 10-year-old, a boy or girl. Life can be very confusing.
Exactly.
And I think it's true for everybody. And I think that's sort of the magic of Moonlight is like, yes, this is about a specific person and it comes from a specific place, but these ideas are very universal. What sort of the basic ideas of this, of what adolescence is like and coming of age is like. And, I think if you can tap into those things, it becomes sort of like, everyone feels confused and insecure and scared and all these different feelings. And, I think if you can sort of use techniques to express that, for us, you're right, the shadow of the field, all the different flares and the artifacts of the camera systems that were going on, for us sort of like made everything around, this is going to sound a little bit like a little bit of a line, really silly, but the idea that like, if you can see the world around him crumbling or in breaking up in some respects, the way that you see a lens sort of start to break down on the edges of frame or things like that. Sort of those, they sound silly to say that out loud, but I think those, when you think about it, of course, that's kind of what we were hoping for, is to use lenses that felt like they were breaking or on the edge of breaking at times, and have the focus not always precise and things like that.
Yes, it's a little bit the way we found in digital to bring back that chaos that film used to give us, kind of.
Totally. Oh, for sure. 100%. Yeah.
And the last, I think now, part of the interview, I want to talk a little bit, it's about how you balance your career in advertising and feature, because I thought that maybe after Moonlight you must have received tons of invitation for a lot of features, but you didn't do so much, because I guess you are picky on the scripts, right? Do you see advertising as a way to make a living, make a good money while you wait for the good script to fall in?
There's an element of truth to that, but I think for me, maybe more important than that is I sort of needed something to improve. I needed something about my career to mature, and I needed to learn a lot more before I felt comfortable, what you might call graduating or whatever it might be. And I never, a lot of cinematographers start in music videos, and then you go to commercials, then you find a feature. It was very different for me, and so what I missed out on the time of learning a lot very quickly was that I never did go into advertising or things like that, and learning techniques very fast. And so I think for me, going to that space for a little while helped a lot make Beale Street look the way it did. I learned a tremendous amount from that experience. So I look at it more so about what I can learn from these different sort of avenues and different platforms, as opposed to maybe like valuing features over commercials or commercials over music videos or whatever. Maybe like people assume these things mean more to some people than another thing. For me, it's about like trying to learn from these different places and different arenas to be able to sort of use techniques in a way that I didn't know before. And I think I'm still very much in that place. I still feel like I'm learning a lot every day from a different opportunity that wasn't around before. So, that's sort of what was going on. And, I saw after Moonlight an opportunity to sort of put my foot into that space for a little while. And that opportunity really wasn't around before, to be honest with you. Not as much anyway. A little bit, but not as much. And so it was about that. It was about like taking a chance, looking at something differently, learn from that, commercial spaces, and learn how to, just different techniques, different collaborative styles, and different filmmakers too. I mean, a lot of these commercial directors, are just different and have different ideas and different ways of collaborating. And so it was about learning all that stuff and taking from that, how to move forward.
It's good also because you have access to expensive toys also that then afterwards when you go to your very small budget feature, you go like a sniper. You say, oh, I want to use this lens because I've used a shitty commercial, but it works really well. It's a way to get.
I think definitely there's opportunities for that, no doubt about it. But I also think that it goes both ways. I mean, things I learned doing small films, I can approach and use on a commercial, on a big budget commercial. But it's just about sort of figuring out who we are and how to express ourselves. And I think I really do value some of the collaborations and collaborators I've met doing commercials in both ways, for sure.
Ah, great. Well, James, thank you very much. I think my questions are over.
Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure. I see someone wrote here just like you for the skin question again on Moonlight. Did you use something in makeup to make them to make the skin shine a little more or not? Yes.
Yeah,
all
definitely.
The time.
Our makeup artist, Donnie Davies, a very talented woman, and she's done 3 projects with us, and she's really, 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 really talented, I think, actually, and a great person as well. She, on Moonlight, I think she changes them each time. I think when we're looking for a certain kind of reflectivity to a certain face, so she uses a lot of different products and a lot of different things that work for a certain actor or a certain technique that we're looking for. On Moonlight specifically, I remember her talking about a product that I think is just, I don't know beauty products generally, of course, but a product that was called rosehip oil from the plant of flower rose. Rosehip oil, and it's just I think it's just a moisturizer, to be perfectly honest. But I think we used it for Moonlight. But I think she uses a variety of different things depending on what we're looking for. We were looking for a very like almost not a gloss. Obviously, we didn't want to make the actors look like they were, dripping in something. But Miami was hot. We wanted
that's what I felt.
Exactly.
It felt like they were.
Yeah.
And so yes, I think I've covered all the things I wanted. So thank you very much, James. It was a pleasure.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for the honor. I appreciate it. Of course, to speak with you guys is great.
Oh man, thank you. And we hope to see you soon, maybe in Brazil for one of the ABC weeks.
I hope so too. That sounds amazing.
Okay then.
All right.
Thank you, James. Take care, bro.
All right. Bye-bye.
Be safe.
You too. Bye-bye. Bye.